So I'm Hannah, I'm the founder of the Funding Crowd, and we're a crowdfunding consultancy. So 5 years ago, I started my PhD on crowdfunding, and I'm just about finishing it off. And alongside my PhD, I've been running crowdfunding campaigns for about the last 5 years. I've done about 60 now, and they've all hit their target. And I've obviously learned a lot along the way. So about 2 years ago, I started the Funding Crowd, and we work as campaign strategists and project managers to bring campaigns to life on sites like Crowdcube and Seedrs and Kickstarter and Indiegogo.
Wow, I think everybody's just had their mind slightly blown there, hasn't it? Right, let's get our heads into crowdfunding here. Okay, so tell us a bit about crowdfunding and maybe some of the misconceptions and some of the truths that are around it, Hannah.
Sure. So there are four main types of crowdfunding. The one that I work on, the ones that I work on are called campaign-based crowdfunding. And the main kind of definition of campaign-based crowdfunding is that it's public, and there are different types that depend on what you're offering the crowd. So there is rewards-based crowdfunding, which is like Kickstarter, where you're offering a product or a gift. Then there's donation-based crowdfunding, which is essentially charitable giving. And then there's equity-based crowdfunding, where you're offering equity to the crowd. So you open, say, 10% of equity, and if someone can contribute from £10, and based on that proportion, they'll get a small bit of equity in your company. And the second part of that question regarding misconceptions. So the biggest misconception is that the crowdfunding platform will bring you the funding that you need. This is absolutely not the case. It's a very competitive landscape now. And the biggest thing that people get wrong is that they don't do preparation before they launch. To put that into some context, I've run multiple campaigns, and as a consequence studied kind of the data behind each campaign. And it almost always comes out that about 10% of what you raise is from those really close to you. So your parents, your friends, your family. Then about 70 to 80% is from people that you bring to the platform. So these are the wider circle. So beyond your friends and family, your Facebook followers, your people on LinkedIn, your friends of friends, and the way that you market your business. So if you use any Facebook ads, or if you use any organic marketing, these are all the people that you're getting in touch with and bringing to the platform. So that constitutes the vast majority of your funding. And then only between 10 and 20% of what you raise is actually coming organically from the platform. So if you were to launch your campaign without that 70 to 80%, then you'd expect to only really get about 20% of what you wanted to get.
Yeah, those numbers are really good, just to, feel the scale of it. And every time anybody says 80 and 20, you just think of Pareto's rule, don't you? That sort of, it still stands even in these different contexts. It's said that female founders have a higher success rates on crowdfunding platforms compared to with angels and VCs. Is that true? And if so, why do you think that might be?
Yes, that's exactly the case. So women are actually better at running crowdfunding campaigns than men. We have more successful campaigns. Just about, I think it's like we have a 53% success rate and men have a 51% success rate. But compared to the percentage of women that get angel or venture capitalist investment, which is more like, unfortunately, kind of 3% and 5%. And unfortunately, that's got lower during COVID as well. Obviously, that's a significant difference. So yes, absolutely is true. And it's a significant, they're significantly more successful compared to angel and VC. And I think the reason that is firstly, and this is purely anecdotal, but I work with a lot of female founders, and every female founder that I've worked with has been a lot more organized than the male founders that I worked with. Now, that is a sweeping generalization. It's based purely on my experience, but that has been what I've experienced. And every time I promote a project plan, or I bring in like a strategy for a client, it has consistently been the female founders that have followed the plan diligently and implemented all the things really effectively in the way that they needed to be. So that's one thing. I think another thing as well is that women, and again, this is from my research, they're deemed more trustworthy as a stranger. So when you're giving your money to a stranger, in general, you're more likely to give money to a stranger that's a woman versus a stranger that's a man. And obviously crowdfunding is really important for converting strangers, because you don't have the opportunity to go to all of them individually. Hence why I think women do better at crowdfunding.
Mm. And also, you know, there's sort of a recognized inherent bias in angel and VC networks, isn't there? So, you know, it does well, relatively speaking, as well. You know, it's sort of like, it's not always a positive spin on it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think from my experience, and I'm obviously trying to change this, but angel and VC investment is very networks driven. And so it's quite hard, since for a long time, the biggest investors and those with the most capital have been men. It's hard to break that and bring in more female investors. It is changing, but as a consequence, it's unfortunately naturally the case that men with lots of money tend to know other men with lots of money, and they tend to invest in men. So it's yeah, that's the bias within that system.
Yeah, and it's certainly something I know that Chi and Natalie and myself are really interested in and learning more about, and hoping to be able to make some things happen in that space with our networks in the future. So I'm just dropping that little hint and seed for people to watch this space for another month or two and see if it comes to fruition. So some of the more well-known crowdfunding examples include rounds that, you know, for Monzo, Revolut, and Free Trade. Can you tell us a little bit about those, for those of us that don't maybe know more detail about those particular examples? And then also, you know, why could crowdfunding be good for tech startups?
Sure. So Monzo and Revolut are both challenger banks, and they ran, I think, both of them on separate platforms. So Monzo was on Crowdcube and Revolut was on Seedrs. They both broke records when they crowdfunded. So they had like thousands of investors come in to invest in Monzo and Revolut. Free Trade is if anyone's heard of Robinhood in the US, they've been in the news quite a lot recently because of the whole GameStop thing. Free Trade is a UK version of Robinhood. Basically allows you to invest in stocks and shares within fractions, so you can invest in the stock market from just £10. And yeah, they're well known for having really capitalized on crowdfunding and bringing lots and lots of investors. The kind of average number of investors that I tend to see on platforms are about between 200 and 400 investors. Monzo had tens of thousands of investors, so they're pretty huge. Another one I didn't mention because it's not a tech company is Brewdog. They're very well known as well for running lots of equity. So everyone nod there, so totally familiar with the beer. And the reason they're also successful, and this is a kind of a big point that I think will probably come with later questions, is that they managed to really bring their community behind them and really incentivize their community to invest and give investors kind of an exclusive experience. So Monzo had a special investor card, and I remember a couple of my friends investing in Monzo and, you know, whipping out the investor card at a bar and feeling very special and exclusive. And I think Monzo and Brewdog and Revolut and Free Trade did that really effectively, which is why they were so successful.
Yeah. And you can see how it links to some of the conversation we had earlier on with Lisa, doesn't it, on that pricing and you know, value and demand and package overlap. It can be really interesting. Okay, so you've whetted our appetite. We think crowdfunding is a brilliant idea. We're all women, and some of us have tech startups. So would your advice be for those of us that are considering crowdfunding?
Yeah, great. So the first thing is crowdfunding right for you? And that's the first step. And as I've mentioned already, the majority of the investment you will be bringing yourself. So you need to really work out whether you have the appetite within your network to bring about 60 to 70% of what you want your target to be. And it's not only your ability to do that, but is that useful for you to do? And secondly, is it the right time for you to do that? So to give you an example, I'm working with a company at the moment that's a wealth tech platform, and it's basically for the super wealthy, helping manage their investments. It's a kind of a hybrid between having a wealth manager and an online bank, and they're pretty confident they do have that amount of investment in their network, but they've decided not to launch a crowdfunding campaign because they want to wait until their tech is ready and they're ready to scale and they can really bring on the number of investors and the number of customers that they want. So that's the first big thing. Like, do you have that appetite in your network? And is it a good time for you to bring those people in right now? If the answer is yes, then the next big thing to do with crowdfunding success is your messaging. So crowdfunding is very unique in terms of the messaging that you need to portray, because it's not the same as selling your product to your clients or your customers. It's not the same as selling your business to angel investors. It's somewhere in between. And so you need to be able to describe your business in a way that the average consumer who doesn't know anything about crowdfunding or investing will understand, as well as a sophisticated investor who invests consistently in businesses and invests on these sites. So those are the two things. I don't want to overwhelm with like all the big tips, but I would say that those two things are the biggest thing. Firstly, can I actually get that 60 to 70%? And is it a good time to do that? And secondly, what is my message and how is it going to resonate with all types of investors that I want to attract?
Great. And then one of my final questions before I open it up to the group for more comments and thoughts and questions. What do you think are the key success factors for crowdfunding?
So definitely, obviously those things I mentioned. If you're coming to the platform with investment, you've got a good messaging, you're well on your way. There's some other kind of tips and tricks that work very well is firstly thinking about what your hooks are. So I've got a campaign going live tomorrow at 9 a.m. and they are a meal subscription service, and they're doing really well. They've got really great numbers, but the big hook for them is that their nutritionist is Anthony Joshua's nutritionist. So they're leading with that, obviously, because everyone's like, oh, I've heard of Anthony Joshua, and that's an easy hook. So that's a first big tip. Really think about what is the thing that's going to raise people's eyes. Raise people's eyebrows to get them really interested in a campaign, because most people make their decision to invest very quickly, and it's normally on the back of these what feel like, in the grand scheme of things, pretty trivial, but actually do get someone over the edge. So the normal kind of user journey for investment is, oh, this looks interesting because their nutritionist is the same as Anthony Joshua. Then I'll look at the pitch deck, then I'll look at the valuation, then I'll learn a little bit more, but really what pulls them in is that hook. So that's the first big thing. Make sure you got a good hook. And if you're pre-revenue and pre-product, that can be quite hard, but there are several aspects of traction that you could perhaps touch on. I'll just quickly go through them. I don't want to keep going because I can get a bit carried away. But firstly, you have partnerships. So if you're working with any big companies or any well-known names in any capacity, that's good evidence of traction. Then you've got your revenue numbers. Then you've got your customer numbers, social media followers, things like that. Then you have press. So if you've got any recognition, that's pretty big. Your team. So I was talking to Victoria in the breakout room, who's very experienced within HR. That's obviously a big hook for her company, is that she's incredibly experienced, so she knows this market really well. And then the final thing is your market. So another campaign I'm working on is a CBD marketplace. So if anyone's not familiar with CBD, it's the non-psychoactive substance in cannabis, which is legal in the UK, and he has lots of different products with CBD in, and it's very much a trending market. So if you're in a trending market, that can be your hook. So working within CBD is something that gets people interested. So I think that's one big success factor. What is your hook? And then the other thing I would say, without again trying to overwhelm with too much information, is dedicate lots of time. I think the businesses that I've worked with that have done the best are the ones that really made sure that they had time allocated within their weeks to manage a campaign, because it can be very demanding, very time consuming, and if you don't give yourself room, it can get pretty manic. So yeah, I think that summarizes the big things.